Welcome to the Exec Exchange, 15-minute podcast in which a leader from the water sector shares the story to inspire, inform, and educate other water sector leaders from around the globe. My name is Piers Clark, and my guest today is Callan Paske, the new General Manager for Customer and Community at TasWater. This is the first of 3 podcasts we're doing with TasWater. Callan, it's wonderful to be with you today.
Lovely to be with you, Piers, and hello to all your listeners.
Thank you. Now, the topic we're going to talk about today is what is breakthrough performance and why is it important? But before we get to that, let's just quickly recap on your career. And as I just mentioned, you're the new General Manager for Customer and Community. So what have you done to get to this role?
I'm a Tasmanian boy, born and bred from the northwest coast, a little island off the bottom of Australia. I grew up here, studied journalism, communications background, and then travelled to the UK, worked in some sports marketing roles for a couple of years before meeting a girl and settling back down in Tasmania. My career has spanned consulting in communications and public relations, as well as working in sales and marketing at an executive level in the food business, in local government in Tasmania, and then finally into TasWater, where I've been for the last 3 years working across the customer and community space, but also for the last year working in operations before getting the new general manager role.
Brilliant. I love that little bit. Yeah, I met a girl, had to come back down to Tasmania. Does that mean you met a girl and had to run away from her, or you met a girl and brought her back to Tasmania, or you met a girl and she was in Tasmania and that's what brought you back?
I met a girl in Tasmania, left said girl to go over to the UK, and then came back, planning to go back to the UK, and stayed because of the girl. So there you go.
Excellent. That's such a good, what a romantic story. All right. Well, thank you for that update and congratulations on the new role. Now, most listeners will know about TasWater, but let's just do the quick 30-second summary as to who is TasWater, what do you do?
We're the water and sewage utility for the state of Tasmania. We're not really centralised, so it's a pretty rural and regional area. As a result of that, we're an amalgamation of 29 councils. Ultimately, we're owned by those 29 councils as well as part ownership from the state government. So we've got lots of treatment plants. Almost 40% of Australia's treatment plants managed by major water utilities reside in Tasmania. So lots of small treatment plants, disparate assets and ageing assets across the state.
Brilliant. Now let's talk about breakthrough performance. Why do we need breakthrough performance and what does that phrase mean within TasWater?
The business has been on a transformation journey in the last 3 to 4 years. The business is only 11 years old, coming up on 12 years old. So it's a relatively new business, really, as an amalgamation of all of those council bodies, as I said. So it's still growing into itself. It's still maturing, but there's been an understanding that we need to make bold decisions about where we need to invest to take the organisation to the service level we think Tasmanians deserve. We've got lots of ageing assets. We've got lots of things that need to be fixed and improved for better outcomes for customers and for the environment. So we've been on this journey around how do you create a step change, not just gradual continuous improvement, but how do you create breakthrough performance? And it comes from leaders being prepared to generate a future that is not just a small improvement on what we did yesterday, but in fact actually changes the game. And then generating that purposefully rather than waiting for circumstances to impact you.
What I love about this is water utilities around the world, we're always aspiring to be better. And most of the time it's incremental change because we're already doing pretty well and it's a bit of tweaking here, tweaking there and getting incrementally better. What you've done in TasWater is you've shaken the core of that foundation to say, no, we are not good enough. And therefore, it's a radical shift in how we think, how we behave, what we do, the decisions we make. You're making deliberate changes to how you do things to drive through a shift in how TasWater is perceived and operates for its customers. And it's great words, but it only really matters if you can give me some examples of where you needed to improve and what you did to do that. So, Callan, give me some examples of where you needed to improve and what you did.
I think utilities in general are often risk averse by their very nature. They are either government owned and as a result risk averse, or they're in a sector that doesn't tend to want to take risks. What I think we've benefited from in George's leadership is setting ambitious targets and to a certain extent a removal of a fear of failure, understanding that some of those targets won't be met, but let's set them further out than we think that we could perhaps get to, and not set a safe target. If you think about our general corporate scorecard, there are some key metrics, customer trust, for instance, around are we delivering for the community? On a 0 to 10 scale, for people to trust us, they must rate us at 8, 9 or 10. Otherwise, they don't truly trust us. We've seen significant, almost double-digit growth in customer trust over the last 24 months since we embarked on this new ambitious strategy with pretty ambitious targets. So both on the customer side, the proof is in the pudding, the work that we've done around communication in particular and telling people what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the value we drive. And even when we've gotten it wrong, when there's been crisis, what we've done is been really front-footed with what's happened and what we're doing about it. And over that period, we've seen significant customer trust growth. At the same time, internally, we had very low staff engagement. To deliver great outputs, you've got to have a team that are committed, cohesive, and all driving towards the same goal. The strategy has given us that. It's also given us the opportunity to understand what good looks like and what we're focused on. And then some of our basic service metrics around regulatory responses, around response times to issues, rectification times, reduction in complaints, all of those things are trending on track with the corporate scorecard, which again gives us real trust that we're on the right lines with some of those decisions.
Brilliant. Now, you mentioned at the beginning of that section, George. George will be our podcaster for the third of our series of podcasts on TasWater, and he is the chief executive for TasWater. Now, I love the change that you've made in those key statistics on customer trust and staff engagement and the regulatory responses, but I still haven't quite got down to what is it you've done. So can you give me an example of what it is you've done? And you teased me there with, even when things go wrong, we own up to it and we move forward. Tell that story as well, please.
I'll give you an example, and it's got a link with the UK. We have a factory down here, Cadbury's, so chocolate factory. Tasmania is very proud of the factory that is here, but they discharge trade waste into one of our treatment plants. And late last year, we had a treatment upset driven by a discharge of trade waste that was well outside what we should have been receiving, unbeknownst to us. And as a result, we were discharging non-compliant waste into the Derwent, which is a big body of water in Greater Hobart. So school had closed. The next day was beautiful weather. Everyone set to swim in the Derwent, and the Department of Public Health came out and said, you can't swim in the Derwent because one of TasWater's treatment plants is discharging non-compliant waste. Previously, we would have been pretty quiet about that. The business would have been shy about why that had occurred, pretty risk averse in terms of naming those players up. The business took a very different decision this time around, which was to say, this is what's happened. This is our view of why it's been caused. We are fixing it and we are working with that customer, but we are not going to own or accept responsibility for a customer doing the wrong thing. Pretty bold decision, and not one the organisation has done previously.
And bold because it could flare up. It looks like a tit for tat. And it all depends on the trust you've got with the public as to whether they're going to think you're just getting drawn into a tit for tat. Oh, they're just blaming someone else. They're trying to dodge the bullet, or whether they're telling us the truth and who we trust. So it is a really bold decision to make that. How did it go?
Customer trust increased over the same period, and at a time when, as I say, closing the River Derwent, meaning that school kids couldn't swim over those next few days, was a big, big thing. It's Australian summer, heading into Christmas. It's the first time that's ever occurred on that level. And I guess the big point was, in terms of the communication, we didn't say that it wasn't our responsibility to fix it. We didn't shy away from the need that we had to work with that customer for us to get that plant back up online and to give clear updates on how that was happening, because that business is also a big employer in Tasmania, but that doesn't mean they don't have a part to play in it. So I think the balance of the communication around, we're going to be transparent around what's happened. We're not going to shy away from the cause of it, but we're also not walking away from our responsibility to fix it. Getting that balance right was important, but I guess more to the point, you talk about breakthrough performance and making bold decisions. That was one of those ones where previously I think we would have been pretty quiet. We would have stayed away from media. In fact, we were the ones going out and saying, hey, here's what's happening. We were on radio. We were on a press conference up alongside the Premier of the state talking about what the plan was. So I think the feedback from stakeholders and the community at large told us that that's the right play, and that they want us to be open and transparent and to understand that we take our responsibility to the services we deliver for Tasmanians and the environment, which we know Tasmanians cherish above almost anything else, really importantly.
There are going to be utilities listening to this going, God, I hate them. I want that double-digit growth in some of those key metrics. What's your advice to them? How do they start on this journey? Because to say, oh, it's about bold leadership is true, but it's a hard thing to start on. What would you advise a utility listening to what you're doing to do as their first step forward if they want to be achieving this sort of breakthrough improvements in some of their key metrics?
It sounds really simple, and often the best things are, right? But what has been transformative in this business is that idea of alignment at a senior leadership level. There's been a lot of work done with the executive and the senior leadership team on where we're going and why we're going there and what good looks like. And then being prepared to, rather than wait for circumstance or an incident to occur to make us do something. The Cadbury's one called for that. But conversely, being proactive in making things happen ourselves rather than waiting for things to occur. So things like our investment program, it would be easy to tell people we're going to depress prices. We're not going to rock the boat. We'll just leave this for someone else down the line. And that's not what we're doing. We're saying, no, we've got a problem. We need to fix it now. And we know that no one likes a price increase, but we're going to really communicate the value and why it's important and the fact that we're not going to pass it down the line for someone else to have to carry. We care enough to do the right thing now, but that's going to mean making bold choices, bold decisions.
And bold is about confidence. That's what I think I'm hearing. It's about saying, we know what the right thing is. We're going to stand by it. We're going to do the right thing. And we're going to argue why we're doing it and inform people and get everybody on board. It is a simple, clear message, but it's quite hard to do.
I think the important distinction then is even if you're not quite sure how you're going to do it at the time, still make the declaration.
Brilliant. Now, we're running out of time, and we normally finish with the question of if you could go back 20, 30 years, what advice would you give your younger self? But Callan, you're ridiculously young already. So I'm not going to ask you that one. I'm going to ask you the question that I hope someone will ask my children, which is, what do you owe your parents?
Well, I owe them everything. They taught me that I could do anything. They gave me opportunity to experiment, to be safe, to do so and try lots of different things. And as a result, that taught me that I can do that and not be too worried about failure. We talk in Australia about having a crack. I'll have a crack at that. And I've always benefited throughout my entire career and even in personal life. I've benefited from good luck and good fortune, but part of that's been about being in the right place at the right time and then being prepared to give it a crack. And Mum and Dad taught me that I could do that. And even if it went wrong, I'd have a safe space to fall.
You have been listening to the Exec Exchange with me, Piers Clark, and my guest today has been Callan Paske, the General Manager for Customer and Community at TasWater. And we have been talking about breakthrough performance, what it is, how you achieve it, and why it's important to do. Thank you to our sponsors. And until next time, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.